Alright guys, welcome to another video from RC Mojo. Today we're continuing the XV-01 series with the first part of the build. I think what we're going to do is split up the videos by the parts bags. Bag A being the front gearbox, B being the rear, and so on and so forth. Somewhere I will put the letter of the current bag on the screen and the build stage for those following along at home. Back when we did the TT-01E build, one of the most common comments was that the videos were too quick, so this time we'll spend a bit more time on each section. Let us know what you think. More comments means better videos. Okay, let's get started. As always, the first job is to have a good read of the manual, just to avoid surprises. Once you've had a good look, gather up some tools. You'll need a big and a small Phillips screwdriver, a nice sharp knife, a pair of pliers, some scissors, a pair of tweezers, and you should also try and find a pair of side cutters to cut the plastic parts from the parts trees. Mine have gone walkies, so I had to resort to less ideal methods with a bit of trimming with the knife. Also very handy is having a few pots to tip the screws bags in so you don't lose them off the table. Step 1. And in at the deep end if you've not built many kits, a pair of sealed oil-filled diffs. First job is to open up bag A and sort out the bits. We'll need the diff cases and covers, the bag of O-rings and gaskets, the neoprene bushes, bearings and stubs, and of course the screws bag, which we'll put straight into a pot so we don't lose anything. For those new to Tamiya kits, the gist of it is this. On the left side of each step is a list of parts that will come from the currently open bag. The drawings are actual size so you can compare directly. Normally fixings, bearings and other miscellaneous small parts are listed. To the right is the assembly drawing. This shows the plastic parts that come from the parts trees and the larger loose parts. When all the bits in the assembly drawing are complete, you should have a complete assembly ready to fit. Collect together all the parts for the current step, then start putting it together. So, the diffs. Take one of the diff cases, a drive stub, an O-ring and a washer. Pop the drive stub into the case from the outside, then slide the O-ring over from the inside. Then chase that with a washer. Be careful not to damage the O-ring. You could use a drop of silicone oil if you're a bit unsure. Now for the tricky bit. The stub has a hole through the end and you need to put one of the little pins through it. This will compress the O-ring ever so slightly, making it tricky to get in. Once it is though, pop one of the larger nylon gears over so the pin drops into the slot. Now take one of the cross pins and pop one of the smaller gears on each end. They should spin freely. That assembly now goes into the diff case with the ends of the cross pin sat in the slots. With that done, grab the silicone oil and fill it up. Slowly work the gears to persuade any trapped air out and leave it to one side. Grab one of the diff covers and build it up much like the diff case. Pop a drive stub through the hole from the outside, fit an O-ring, then the washer, being careful not to damage the seal, and then pop the drive pin through the hole in the stub and drop one of the plastic gears over the pin. With that ready, slip one of the gaskets on and you're ready to seal it up. Now, the small screws for this are hex drive, so somewhere in the bag where you found the silicone oil will be a bag with some tools. You can use a small Allen key, or if you have your own set, a 1.5mm key will fit. Right, offer up the cover to the diff case and gently press them together. You may get a bit of seepage at this point, so have a paper towel at the ready. Pop a screw in each of the holes and tighten in the usual cross pattern. Do each screw up a turn or so, starting with the top left, then the bottom right, top right, and the bottom left. Keep going until all the screws are nice and snug. There's no need to do them up super tight, just bottom them out plus a little tweak will be fine. You want to avoid over tightening and stripping the threads. When you're done, you should have something that looks like this. The two drive stubs should rotate in opposite directions quite freely. Slight notchiness is acceptable here as the plastic gears will wear in after a couple of minutes of runtime. And now, the best bit. You get to do all that again just to make the other one. It's the same exact build, so I won't repeat myself. With both diffs complete, you need to press the larger bearings on. They're a very tight fit, so need a bit of force. The important thing to remember is to only press the inner race, as bearings don't like side load. When all 4 bearings are on, you need to pop the neoprene bushes into the drive stubs. These are there so the dog bone type drive shafts don't rattle about. And now, step 2, the internals of the front gearbox. Collect all the parts listed on the left, like so. Then go through the assembly drawing and find plastic parts. A1 and A2 for the gearbox halves, BG3, the little spacer that goes into its own sprue, an idler and counter gear, 2 NN4 spacers, and a JJ7, which I missed initially, so you'll see me grab that when we get to the main shaft. Right, grab the mill shaft, the one without the hex, pop the drive pin through the hole, offer up the idler gear so the pin fits into the slot. Then an NN4 followed by a bearing at both ends. I now notice the JJ7 spacer, so that gets fished out. Grab the main shaft and fit the counter gear over the hex and pop a bearing on the end. Now on the other side we need to fit the plastic spacer that was on its own sprue, making sure it's smooth. Pop that over the shaft and follow it with a metal shim. Then JJ7. And last, a larger bearing. Fit the 2 assembled shafts into one of the gearbox halves as per the drawing. Don't grease them up yet though, as it'll only get messy. Then put the countersunk screw in, and don't do it up completely yet. Leave it so the 2 halves of the gearbox can still move around a bit. This just makes it so the parts can align themselves that bit easier in the next section. Speaking of the next section, it's time for number 3. There's not much to collect for this one. 4 screws, an E-clip, and a drive pin. Find those, then grab number 12, a top hat spacer, 13, a pulley, and 24, the pulley cap from the NN parts tree. And of course, you'll need A3, the bottom of the gearbox. Start by putting the top hat spacer over the shaft. The narrow end should fit into the gearbox. Now the drive pin goes into the hole. Fit the 2 parts of the pulley together, they just press together when the keyways line up. The pulley then fits over the shaft so the pin fits into the slot. Lastly, fit the E-clip, pop the clip into the slot at the end of the shaft, then squeeze it the rest of the way with some pliers. If you're worried about sending the clip across the room, put the gearbox in a plastic bag to keep things contained. Now is a good time to grease it up. Squirt some ceramic grease in through the bottom of the gearbox while rotating one of the shafts. Keep going until there's a nice even coat on the gears. You don't need much. Pop the diff in. Again, if you rotate the shafts, you'll see some of the grease spread nicely onto the diff gear. Now fit the bottom of the gearbox, making sure it matches up with the assembly drawing. Then, just like when we built the diffs, do the screws up in a cross pattern. When they're snug, don't forget to tighten the countersunk screw we left loose in the last step. Step 4. In this one you'll need some Loctite. Tamiya recommends a gel type, but I'll use liquid because with the right technique it's easier to make sure it only goes where you want it. Only a few screws to collect this time, 3 long ones and 4 short. You'll also need parts 1 and 2 off the KK parts tree, the gear cover backing piece, B5, and the aluminium motor mount. Start by loosely attaching K1 to K2, making sure the orientation matches the assembly diagram. Then line it up on the gearbox and insert the 3 long screws. Don't apply any Loctite yet. Then place the gear cover on the other side of the gearbox. All this gets held together when you fit the motor plate. To apply the liquid Loctite, put a drop on each of the 3 threaded holes, then wipe the excess off. There will still be a little that's wicked into the threads. Place it over the ends of the screws and tighten them up. The screws will push out even more of the Loctite, so give it a wipe. Quick, easy, and it gets it where it's needed. This is important as most plastics don't like Loctite and can turn brittle, so you need to take some care with it. The last 2 screws go into the other side of KK2, so just tighten them and the 2 on the other side so they're nice and snug. Be careful not to over tighten, and we're done. Next up, step 5, the spur gear. Right, collect up the 4 screws, a drive pin, and find the JJ parts tree and grab parts 11 and 8. Pop JJ11 over the main shaft and line up the slots with the hole and pop the drive pin through. The spur gear then goes on over the top of that. Then the top gap goes on with the little lug slotted in place. Spin the spur on the shaft so the holes line up and pop the screws in and tighten. Be careful about over tightening as they don't have much meat to thread into. Now for the last step of the day, and parts bag A, fitting the motor. Find the pinion and the grub screw and loosely fit them together right away so the grub screw doesn't disappear. Now collect the other bits, 4 screws and 2 small washers. You'll also need B6, the gear cover. Offer the motor up to the motor plate and put the 2 smaller screws with washers each loosely into the motor. You want to still be able to slide it back and forth. Fit the pinion so it's in line with the spur and do the grub screw up nice and tight. Now you need to set the mesh. We want a tiny amount of backlash. Snug up the screws, then twist the motor a tiny amount until you have something that looks like this. Spin the spur a bit and test it in several places around the gear, just in case it's slightly off center. When you're happy, give the screws a good tighten. Now grab the gear cover, fit it over the spur and insert the remaining screws. Job done. So that's parts bag A. Seems a bit odd, it doesn't include the bits that fit the damper mount and the other bit, K2, but that just means we've got more to do next time. Thanks for joining us, hope you enjoyed and that it was useful. If you did, and it was, please hit the like button. And if you want to be told when the next parts go up, hit subscribe if you haven't already. Until next time, thanks guys, bye.